Welcome to the Roberts Law Office Injury Podcast. Kentucky attorney Jeff Roberts has over 25 years of experience. He'll provide answers to your questions related to personal injury and automobile accidents, workers' compensation claims, and Social Security disability benefits. Let's join Jeff for this episode. All right, friends, we're back in the studio here with Calloway County attorney Jeff Roberts. And Jeff, today we're going to talk about something that's very unfortunate, although quite common. This is distracted and drowsy driving.
Yes. How are you doing today, Jim?
Well, I'm doing fine. I love these conversations with you because, once again, I learn a lot, but it's just a great way to kind of talk about a topic that, you know, it's the law. So, I mean, it's complex stuff, but you make it very easy to understand. And I love these conversations. Yeah. Unfortunately, if anybody's been driving for a while, especially if they have teenagers or young drivers, distracted driving is a major problem, and it's not only for people who are driving cars, but it's also for truck driving. And I know, you handle truck accident cases, you handle car wreck cases, distracted driving in and of itself is just something that doesn't have to happen.
Correct. Distracted driving, and there's various components to distracted driving. Normally, what we think about when we talk about distracted driving is people who are texting and driving, or otherwise using their smartphone while they are driving a vehicle down the roadway.
Watching a movie. I've seen people watching a movie while they're driving.
Watching a movie, and there's been lawsuits over truck drivers who were watching a movie while they were driving a 18-wheeler down the roadway.
Makes you feel safe.
Yeah, exactly. And so that is, it's obviously increased significantly over the last several years with the advent of smartphones, and also with now we have people, you can plug in your computers in a car and you can download movies and watch movies and DVDs and things of that nature. So distracted driving has increased significantly over the past 10 years.
And Jeff, before we jump into this, I always like to, at the outset of these podcast episodes, to remind people that you now have an extra office. I mean, while your primary office is right here in Murray, Calloway County, you also have an office up in Hopkinsville over in Christian County.
Yes, I have a satellite office in Hopkinsville that's been opened up for a little while now, and it working out well. I enjoy meeting with clients up there as well.
Well, if you know anything about Western Kentucky, if you're listening to this down here, you understand there's a lot of heavily trafficked roadways, and some of these are interstates and large state roadways. So, having exposure over in Hopkinsville and down here in Murray, there's a lot of truck traffic out there. And when a tractor trailer driver is driving distractedly, it presents a lot of risk and a lot of potential just catastrophic situations.
Correct, and you're right. There's, in this area of Western Kentucky, we have, of course, Interstate 69, used to be called the Purchase Parkway, I-24, Interstate 24, which travels through Trigg County, close to Christian County, as well as a lot of other counties from that standpoint. We have the Pennyrile Parkway that travels up in the Christian County area as far as just interstates, and then there's a lot of four-lane roads that are in this area that aren't restricted access like the interstates are, like Highway 80, 641, and things of that nature. So we get a lot of semi-traffic on all of those roads from that standpoint, and others that are driving down the road, whether it's in a semi or in a vehicle, a different type of vehicle, a car or truck or something of that nature, that are driving, unfortunately, distracted. Or in the other side of that, or another issue that comes into play, is driving too many hours. Yeah. Being up too long and driving a vehicle after you've been up for a long period of time, and there are regulations on semi-drivers from doing that. You cannot drive over a certain number of hours a day, and then you have to have a break and things of that nature to help recuperate. But both of those, distracted and driving while you're drowsy, are both problematic and can cause some serious accidents.
Well, and I got to think, in this day and age, we're dealing with a lot of these supply chain issues. So you would think these trucking and logistics companies are really doing the best they can to really kind of save time getting from point A to point B. And sometimes there's that temptation that maybe I'm gonna bend the rules or cut the corners here and there, and that drowsy driving can be again just a significant situation that causes not only significant injuries but also unfortunately traffic fatalities.
Correct. And my understanding is there's been some studies that have been done where if you've people who have been awake for an extended period of time and then get into a vehicle, what. And when I talk extended, I'm talking about just being awake, not driving for this period of time. But if you've been awake for like 20 hours and then you get into a vehicle and start driving, that your function is really about the same as if you are at the legal limit from drinking.
Yeah,
from
your
that
brain's
standpoint.
just not as sharp.
Exactly.
I mean, it's just not. Now, you and I both went to Murray State. We both been through many finals weeks, and I just just from studying and stuff like that, you had that. I couldn't imagine getting behind the wheel of a big truck, and then getting out on the highway and thinking, oh yeah, I got this.
Correct.
It's just senseless.
Or even a car.
Yeah,
or
absolutely.
an SUV from that standpoint.
Absolutely.
People. Certain times of the year, people head out on vacations. Fall break, a lot of people will head out on vacation, and then obviously summertime as well. And I know people who have they've gone to work and worked a 12-hour day. They got up 2 or 3 hours before work a 12-hour day, and then get behind the wheel. So, get home, get in the vehicle, load it up, and get behind the wheel and start driving to Florida.
Yeah.
And you aren't too far down the road, and you've been awake for 20 hours.
Right. Let's see how fast we can get to Destin. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so, it can be extremely, extremely dangerous for people to drive in that setting. You need to have good rest and get a good night's sleep rest, and then get on the road from that standpoint. But don't take off after you've been awake for 18 plus hours and get on the road for a long drive. It
just doesn't make sense.
Doesn't make any sense at all, and it's very dangerous to yourself and everybody else on the roadway.
Well, and I think we've all kind of been there. You realize that not only you're not processing as quickly, your reflexes are not there, but you're just, if you nod off, at highway speeds, you can travel quite the distance before you realize it. You can go football fields in just a matter of a couple of seconds, and a truck like that can't stop as quickly.
Yeah.
That's tragic.
Yes, and exactly, and and that comes into play the same what you're talking about comes into play from the standpoint of the distracted driving. You look at your phone to read a text message that you got that you just received, and you think, okay, well, this is only a few sentences. But if you look down at your phone to read that, and your eyes are off the road for 3 seconds, you've traveled, especially if you're on the interstate, you've traveled a long way in that period of time. And, the car in front of you could hit the brakes in that period of time, and you're up on them very, very quickly there. So it's just not a good idea to do either one. Don't drive if you're drowsy, if you're sleepy. Pull over, let somebody else who's not take over the wheel, or pull over and rest. And from that standpoint, and I was on one of our recent episodes, we talked about the fact that I was going up to a Kentucky Justice Association, the annual convention they had recently, and one of the presenters there showed a video of a truck driver talking about the drowsy driving, and they had the truck driver who's driving down the road, and he happened to have a exterior video, but his company had an interior video that showed him. After the wreck, the driver told the police and everything that a tire blew out, and that's what caused him to have the wreck. Get the video and look at the video, and he's driving down the road, and next thing you know, his head is leaning up against the side of the window, and you can tell he's completely asleep, and then the collision happens from that standpoint. So, and that was one. It's just one recent example of that. There actually happened to be video, And so they could. I wasn't the one who handled this case, but the attorney who was talking and showed that video. I mean that they were able to prove that this guy was driving while he was drowsy and fell asleep while he was behind the wheel, and without that video, it would have been he had a tire blew out
Had
and
mechanical
caused,
failure or
had, something happened with the tire, and that's what caused the wreck, and that wasn't accurate at all. So
No, and it's just, the fact is, if you're in a collision with a tractor trailer, it's not going to be a small fender bender.
no,
I mean, typically it's just not. And for somebody to take that kind of a risk, it's just not worth it. And unfortunately, a lot of families right now are looking back going, yeah, we lost a loved one because of this, somebody else's negligence. And it's just, it's not a topic we like to talk about very often, but daggone it, it happens.
It does.
And it's unfortunate when it does. And I'm glad that, you as a plaintiff's attorney, somebody who represents the injured person, is able to kind of step in there and say, hey, wait a minute, no, let's figure this out, because, all the money in the world is not going to bring back a loved one, but the family should be compensated for that negligence. And it's just, it's just a question of being fair.
correct. It goes back to, from my standpoint anyway, goes back to the way I was raised. I was raised that, if me and my friends are playing baseball in the vacant lot that was there in our neighborhood, and one of us hit a ball outside the lot and broke a neighbor's window, we took care of it. We paid for that window, and
It's the right thing to do.
Yeah, exactly. What would happen then was my dad would pay for the window, and then I would work it back off, and I'd pay my dad back, so that the person's window got fixed a lot quicker than I could have paid it off when I was a little kid. But it wasn't we to go home and we don't know how the window got broke. You go tell the person, this is my fault. We did, it was an accident, but that's my baseball laying in your inside your house, and I was the one that bat, and we take care of it. And it's the same here. If I'm involved in a car wreck and I cause an injury to that, and I've talked to people all the time about this, and it's amazing to me when you ask them, especially some who talk about not, I wouldn't sue anybody, I wouldn't pursue anything from that standpoint, and if that's your viewpoint, that's fine. But I would, I've talked to people who have that viewpoint, and I said, well, if you're driving your car and they had a Escalade or a Toyota RAV4, it doesn't matter what they're driving, but you got your car and somebody runs a red light and hits your vehicle and does significant damage to your vehicle, would you expect them to pay for the damage to your vehicle? Oh, absolutely. And if they refuse to pay, would you pursue something? Yeah, they should pay for the damage to my vehicle.
Fair is fair.
And from that, and I said, but if you are, if you're injured and you can't work for 6 months, a year because of this, they shouldn't have to pay for that as well. And it's property damage, but your physical health is something different. And to me, that just doesn't make sense. The physical health is worth, my physical health is worth a lot more to me than the vehicle I drive.
I think, I think there are a lot of people out there with good, kind hearts, and it's easy to kind of make those statements until you're in the middle of it. And then you realize, well, wait a minute, the family is going to be dealing with this type of loss, this type of expense, this type of ongoing medical treatment, all these other expenses. Regardless of how you feel about it, sometimes there's just a practical reality.
True, and I understand that and agree with that. And the other part of it is also let's talk about the distracted driving. It is or the drowsy driving, either one. You got a truck driver who's driven a vehicle and violated the driving standards on how long they're supposed to be on the road, and then they are driving for 18, 20 hours instead of the 11 hours before they're supposed to have a break. Or watching a video or movie while they're driving down the roadway. If they killed my family member, I would be very, very, very angry at that from that standpoint. And I think that's the normal reaction.
Yeah, I dare say most of us.
A normal reaction. And, while a civil case is primarily designed to compensate the victims for what they've lost, there's also can be a punitive damage component to it. But it's the civilized way to get to get compensated or civilized way to punish, so to speak, the other side from that standpoint. And we don't want people taking the law into their own hands, so to speak, and say, well, you caused this injury to this death in my family, so I'm going to show up at your house with a baseball bat and get my retribution.
Yeah.
But it's a way to do to get for the family to at least to get a little bit of I don't want to use the term retribution from that standpoint, but to get a little bit of
it's compensation.
Yeah, well, a little comfort knowing the person didn't get off scot-free.
Yeah.
That there was a little they had some component to this. They had to pay a price for what they did to their family.
They were held accountable.
Held accountable from that standpoint, because a lot of these aren't going to be criminally prosecuted. It's just not going to happen. And the other side of it is, unfortunately, having to pay out money damages motivates people to act right. It's amazing how many things in our society, safety matters, issues that could have been taken by a company producing a part or producing a piece of equipment, and it add $1 to the price tag to make that piece of to add a guard, or $10 to a piece of equipment to add a guard to it, that they don't add to that piece of equipment because they produce 10,000 of these a year, and if they can save $10 on one piece, then that's a whole lot of money. But if then they look at it and say, well, yeah, but if we don't add this guard, then we're going to have to pay, there's a potential we're going to pay a whole lot of damages, and it's actually more financially better for us to put that guard on. They're more likely to put the guard on than they are if we put this guard on, it's going to keep people from getting injured. And it's sad that that's the financial motive is what motivates people sometimes, but unfortunately, especially in a corporate setting, that tends to carry a lot more weight with the decision makers than saving people's lives.
Well, I think one of our earliest podcast episodes about trucking accidents had to do with something with that underride guard, that Mansfield guard, as I believe it's called, which is that piece of really, it's like an extension off the bumper that keeps somebody from running up under the car. And that was due to probably a series of lawsuits that actually said, you know what, we need to implement these safety precautions here.
A lot of the safety equipment on vehicles nowadays are because of lawsuits. And, the federal government has come in and mandated some of them now, but they were mandated by the federal government after the industry had already made the changes because they were paying out damages in lawsuits. Seat backs on cars are much more.
Seat belts themselves.
Seat belts themselves, the shoulder harness, all of those. A lot of these things are there now because of the civil justice system we have in this country. It's made our society a whole lot safer. And I understand people joke at times when they see a warning on a hairdryer or a curling iron that says "don't use while you're asleep," and then they blame lawyers for that type of a warning, and that's fine. We have thick skin from that standpoint, but then they a lot of times they don't realize that the civil justice system is what's made it has saved a lot of people from being and families from suffering some real tragic consequences.
Well, I think there's also that situation where if there is a large verdict or settlement that is known about, a lot of times that also cautions other people who might have engaged in similar activities not to, because they see, wow, that could get really expensive really quickly. Not to mention just the tragedy of the situation, but like you said, sometimes money is a very highly motivating factor. And if people know, hey, that could potentially be me having to write that check, or my company having to write that check, maybe I need to pay a little bit more attention and avoid that kind of activity in the first place.
Absolutely, and that's been proven time and time again.
I think so.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about, we've talked about...
and we got off topic.
No. But it is, these are distracted driving. This is drowsy driving. And unfortunately, with a lot of kids sometimes, especially younger drivers, getting behind the wheel, it can be a little scary, but it can also be a whole new world in front of you. And sometimes there's a lot of, you want to go pick up your friends and you want to go out on a Saturday night, or you want to go out on a Friday night, maybe head down to the lake or somewhere else. And there's always horseplay going on in the car. And unfortunately, that is another form of distracted driving.
Absolutely. And, that's one of the reasons some of the laws are in place in regard to the graduated licensing that we have now in Kentucky. And I think a lot of other states have very similar. When I became licensed more years ago than I'm going to admit on in a podcast, you got your permit. You could get, right after you turn 16, first available date, you could go take the test, get your permit. 30 days down the road, you could go take your driver's license test. And then once if you got your license in, you could carry your 5-year-old sister in the car with you and go anywhere you wanted to go.
Six friends heading to California.
Six friends. Well, if your friends headed to California, you had a lot more leeway than I did. But, 6 friends, load up the car, people sitting on top of each other in the back seat. And, that was allowed then.
Yeah.
And, frankly, the first person on my street that I grew up on that got a driver's license was the one who shuffled everybody else to school.
Absolutely.
After that. And so, all of us would go to school and come back home from that. Now in Kentucky, if I recall correctly, it's longer than 30 days before you actually get your license, so you're a permitted driver for a longer period of time. Unfortunately, it's been a while since my daughter was there, and I had to do this, but I think it's 6 months, if I recall correctly. And then for a period of time after they become a licensed driver and not just permitted, you're limited on the number of people under 21 that can be in the vehicle with you there to keep you from having 6 friends driving around yelling and screaming in your ear while you're driving the vehicle down the roadway.
Right, and I think down the road we may end up doing an episode on pedestrian accidents or collisions with pedestrians. And unfortunately, when you're distracted, especially as a young driver, but it could be anybody who's just not paying attention to what's going on around them, the possibility of not only causing injury to your passengers, but also those around you, other drivers, but unfortunately other pedestrians, and that can happen in the blink of an eye.
It can, and if you live in a larger city, you have a lot more walking traffic in Louisville than you do in Murray, Kentucky. Even though there are walking traffic here, but then here, with the university, a lot of the students cross those roadways around Murray State University, and at various times of the day. I mean, it's not just 8 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, like the school system, public school system is set up for. But in the post-secondary education with the university, you've got night classes, and it can be dark when somebody's walking across that roadway. And if you got, unfortunately, 17-year-old, 18-year-old with a bunch of friends in the car screaming, hollering, or if you get your text and you look at your text while you're driving down that road, it can have tragic consequences.
Oh, and it's sad. I remember last year, I think it was, we did a episode for trick-or-treating right before Halloween, and we talked about, drivers, be careful. You're going to have small kids out there. They're excited. They're distracted, and they're going to be darting in and out of traffic, trying to get across the street or seeing friends and things like that. And again, if you're a distracted driver, not a drowsy driver necessarily, just a distracted driver, you're going to be in a very dangerous situation that can get out of hand very, very quickly and have just horrible, horrible consequences. Consequences you may never, ever forget.
Exactly. And, consequences for you as a driver, consequences for the other people involved as well from that standpoint. And, I see it when I go home a lot on Halloween, going down roadways that have a very high speed limit but you got kids that are going around, and thankfully most of them have adults that are with them that are keeping a close eye on them from that standpoint. But if you're on a road that's got 45 mile per hour speed limit or higher, kids can come out in front of you very quickly, and so it's if you're distracted in any regard, it can cause problems and be very, very tragic.
Well, I think so. And there's always the situation where it doesn't necessarily have to be at high speeds.
No.
If I were heading down to LBL, heading down to the lakes, yeah, I'm going to be going. I'm excited to get down there. I'm going to be driving the highways, and I'm going to probably be, pushing the speed limit a little bit. And obviously, if I'm drowsy or distracted, I mean, things happen very quickly, and with that kind of velocity, again, I could roll a car. I could have all sorts of consequences there and all sorts of outcomes there. But even here in and around Murray or up in Hopkinsville, just driving down Main Street, there's all sorts of things that can happen, and they don't have to. That's the thing about this topic, distracted and drowsy driving. It doesn't have to occur, and just the problems, the expense, the damage, and again, obviously the consequences. I hate to say it, sometimes are just unnecessary.
Yes, and most of the time, frankly. Most of the time they're unnecessary, especially if it's from distracted or drowsy driving, always it's unnecessary. There's no reason to do either one of those activities.
And I got to think, in 30 years, you've been involved in cases like this. You've represented the families. You've represented the victims who have been injured because of somebody else's negligence, which is really what it comes down to.
Correct.
All the money in the world, we said it earlier, all the money in the world is not sometimes going to bring back either a family member or actually bring somebody back to that state they were in prior to the accident. You could be dealing with some serious brain trauma. You could have paralyzed somebody. I mean, just again, these are silly mistakes that aren't really mistakes. They're negligent actions because you decided in your state, hey, I'm drowsy, I'm having trouble keeping my eyes open, but I'm going to get behind the wheel, or hey, I'm going to do a text, or I'm going to watch a movie, or I'm going to read an email. Again, it doesn't have to happen.
Exactly. It does not have to happen. And, I have represented and talked to a lot of families where unfortunately, some fatalities, some very, very serious injuries, quadriplegia, paraplegia from the accidents or from the collisions from that. And then I have talked with the other driver in depositions and things in some of these, and you can tell that it has had a major impact on them. I've had friends who've had accidents, some not even their own making from that standpoint, but they may not even be the person at fault in causing the accident, but somebody in the other car who was at fault died in the wreck, and that even though they weren't at fault, it really affected them from a mental health standpoint. And anybody, if you call anybody who is a normal person, let's say, not a psychotic or something, if you're involved in that wreck, whether you're at fault or not at fault, it's going to affect you. If somebody is very, very seriously injured, somebody is killed in that wreck, and even if you're at fault or not at fault, it's going to affect you from that standpoint. But if you are at fault, it's going to affect you much, much, much greater. And I've talked to people where it's had lifelong changes to them. From that perspective, and it was lifelong changes to the other family as well.
Obviously, so,
from that standpoint, but that is, in there, it's avoidable.
Yeah, don't put yourself, for the sake of all of us, just don't put yourself in those situations. It's that's why it's called negligence. That's really why it's called negligence.
It's negligence. It's not intentional conduct, and that's part of what some people don't understand. They look at, well, they didn't intend it. Well, if they intended it, it's criminal.
Exactly.
I mean that it's a different thing. It is designed for things that are not intended. That's what negligence is. It's something that you didn't intend to cause the person injury, but you engaged in activity that was likely to cause that, and you knew that engaging in that activity was likely to cause the injury. So when you're negligent and you cause injury, you're the one who did it, and that's the reason you should be the one who bears the consequences of it to the extent that you can. Unfortunately, you can't. When somebody else is seriously injured, they're the ones who feels the pain. not you. They're the ones who incurs the medical bills, but your insurance should be the one that takes care of those medical bills and provides them the things that they need to make their life more, at least a little more comfortable and closer to what it would have been if you hadn't been negligent.
Right, and that again is the role that you play for all of us, is being able to represent us when something like that does happen and we are harmed by somebody else's negligence, to be able to say, look, we're going to do absolutely the best we can here, and we are going to hold somebody accountable. And I think that's again, you've done this for 30 years. I mean, you've got your office here in Murray, Kentucky. You've got your additional office up there in Hopkinsville, Kentucky. And in the area of personal injury, you're licensed to practice throughout the Commonwealth of Kentucky. So
correct.
Somebody can call you from Paducah. Somebody can call you from all the way over in the eastern part of the state, or all the way up in northern Kentucky. And I know you've handled cases up there in the past.
I have, yes.
Jeff, if somebody is listening to this and wants to contact your office, what's the best number for them to use?
Best number is 270-753-0053. Have an 800 number as well, 1-800-844-5108. That's the best way to contact me. You can also send me an email at jeff@jeffrobertslaw.com if you wish to email as opposed to making a phone call. And, if you call during regular business hours, unless all the other phone lines are busy, that's got us all tied up, you're going to have a live person answer that phone call. 95% of the time, you're going to have a live person answer that phone call. If you call after hours, we do have voicemail set up for people who want to call after hours, and that's fine. And we'll get that message, or if you want to email, I'll probably see the message before I go to bed that night, because I usually check my email in the evenings at the house and respond to emails at times then. So.
That makes sense. Jeff, thanks for your time. I know this is a sensitive topic. We don't want to bring down the audience, but when you're involved in a situation like this, it can be tragic. And again, I think the theme of this is it doesn't have to happen. If everybody were just a little bit more careful and use some precautions and use some common sense, we could avoid a lot of these things.
Absolutely. And, frankly, I would much rather the accidents be avoided than me getting a phone call.
Absolutely. Jeff, once again, thanks for your time, and we'll be back in a couple of weeks.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye. Thank you for listening to the Roberts Law Office Injury Podcast. Jeff will return in 2 weeks. Until then, he invites you to visit jeffrobertslaw.com and follow his firm on Facebook. At the Roberts Law Office, you'll find a history of small town service and big city results.